Welcome to WitchLit, a place to talk about the craft of writing and writing the craft. I'm your host, Victoria Raschke, author, publisher, witch, and nosy Scorpio. You're here, so you're probably an avid reader of books on witchcraft and the occult. And if you're looking for an online source for alternative books and indie decks, LaPantheraStudio.com has an amazing selection of books, tarot decks, and oracle cards to choose from. No matter your path, whether you're a cunning person or a chaos magician, find the right books for your library. That's LaPantheraStudio.com. WitchLit listeners can enjoy 15% off their purchases with the code WitchLit. That's WITCHLIT, all one word. Link in the show notes. WitchLit is also brought to you by 1000 Volt Press, an independent, family-owned, digital and print-on-demand publisher of books we want to see in the world. If you'd like to support WitchLit and 1000 Volt Press, the best way to do that is to buy our books. Our most recent title is The Keeper and the Mermaid, a debut contemporary fantasy novella by Kathy Lynn. Other titles include Pagan Roots by Yvonne Abarrow, A Death in the Dry River by Lisa Allen Agostini, and my most recent novel, Verona Green, a story of art and magic. Head over to 1000voltpress.com/store or order them wherever you buy books. All those links can be found in the show notes. Listening, subscribing, and leaving a rating or review also supports the podcast, and we really appreciate it, so thank you. Next month, I'll be joined by Lisa McSherry, author of A Traveler's Guide to Making Magic. We'll be discussing the pagan classic Animal Speak by Ted Andrews. It's widely available in print or in digital versions, and your local library probably has it as well. There is an abridged audio version floating about, but I haven't listened to it and I can't vouch for it. One last thing before we jump into this month's episode, my love letter to the enchantment of the year, A Witch's Book of Days, is available to pre-order wherever you buy books. Pre-orders are vital to the success of print books, so if you'd like to have your own copy, pre-ordering it now means a lot to both me and Cross Crow as an indie publisher. The book is out September 8th, 2026. I'm excited to jump into this month's discussion, but as usual, I have some information on the book, an author, and my guest before we get started. We're reading this month, Eternal Egypt, Ancient Rituals for the Modern World by Richard J. Reedy. So about Richard J. Reedy, this is from his obituary in The Wild Hunt, which was published on December 1st, 2015, lightly edited to reflect some updates on things that have happened since then. Richard Reedy founded one of the first Kemetic temples in the United States called the Temple of Ra, based in San Francisco. Richard went on to found 3 more Kemetic temples located in San Jose, Sacramento, and Denver. He stayed personally active in both the San Francisco and San Jose temples, meeting monthly for rituals and study. In 2010, Richard published his book, Eternal Egypt, Ancient Rituals for the Modern World, which was hailed as the first comprehensive collection of key ritual texts performed throughout Egypt during the time of the pharaohs. At the time of his death, he was working on a successor volume to Eternal Egypt. This volume was said to include an additional 30 Kemetic rituals. The Kemetic Temple's family have said that they intend to publish this work posthumously in Richard Reedy's name. This book has since been published. It is called Endless Egypt. So that is also available. Richard was known in the greater pagan community through the many workshops and rituals that he led at Pantheacon, a conference for pagans, heathens, and polytheists, formerly held each February in San Jose, California. And about Eternal Egypt, this is from the book blurb, the description on the back. Eternal Egypt, Ancient Rituals for the Modern World is the first comprehensive collection of important temple rituals performed throughout Egypt during the time of the pharaohs. The author presents 7 key rites from official temple records and ancient esoteric texts for personal or group use. This guidebook also presents rituals in a form designed to assist initiates in restoring the ancient rites of Egypt, provides for modern usage, key ritual texts coming solely from authenticated ancient sources, and contains easy-to-follow commentaries and background information on each ritual, which includes symbolism and mythology not previously available in one book. It also gives text with commentary for the opening of the mouth ceremony, which I think we'll talk about later, offers practical information for conducting these rituals in today's world. Formerly only available to the scholar and professional Egyptologist, These ritual texts reveal the deeply spiritual understanding of humanity's relationship to divinity that characterized the ancient Egyptian sense of the sacred. This is a practical intermediate level text for those wishing to worship the great deities of ancient Egypt in as authentic a manner as possible. And by so doing, tap into the great spiritual heritage that sustained Egyptian culture for over 3,000 years. So I'm excited to talk about this book, and to talk about it with me and the person who chose this book is HiC Letmers. HiC has been a tarot conversationalist, life coach, and ritual and magical consultant for over 25 years. His sessions have been described as a tarot reading, therapy session, and life coaching session all in one. HiC offers his services using the tarot combined with healthy doses of numerology and astrology, a splash of I Ching, a taste of feng shui, and practical application. Along with a heaping spoonful of magic and ritual, HiC assists you in crafting what can enhance and manifest your life in the fullest, most beneficial, and blessed way possible by discovering practical, useful information that can be used to change your life for the better. HiC's approach to a session is creating a space that honors the person and allows them to open the door to ultimately have a conversation with him or her or themselves. In addition to all of that, HiC is an avid mahjong player and teacher. HiC, welcome to WitchLit.
Well, thank you very much. I'm excited to talk about this book.
Well, I'm excited to have you on. So the first question I always ask folks, kind of in this format, is why this book? Why did you choose this book for us to read?
This was a very instrumental book in my development, I guess, as a comedic and in my comedic practice. And I had discovered it just prior to PantheaCon one year. And then I think important for people to see so that they maybe have a better sense of not only how it was done then, but how that can still really be done today, and maybe both connect with kind of that ancestral lineage way back then, but doing it in today's world and in a modern context rather than just feeling like it's an old thing. Because we never called ourselves Reconstructionists, although we are very Reconstructionist-like, because we aren't going to just randomly toss things in because we like it or we think it's cute or something like that. We're still going to base things on how it was done then and what was said then. But we were open to doing adaptation when necessary to be able to make it work as best as possible in the modern world when there are some things that, for example, an old restriction in ancient Egypt was that a woman who was on her period or who was menstruating could not come into the temple and participate in ritual or that kind of thing. So we, of course, will not use that restriction because we have a different understanding and we don't necessarily see that in the same way as maybe they did, or maybe just didn't understand what it was, or just whatever the concept was for them around something like that. On the other hand, there are things like you can't have wool and you can't have leather, in the temple. So we will also abide by that because that's an easy thing to do. It's not like there's anything wrong with not wearing leather while you're doing a ritual. Versus for us, telling a woman she can't come and participate in ritual just because she's on her period,
right,
is not something that we feel is necessary to abide by. So there are those adaptations, but it still is very Reconstructionist-like because it still is very rooted in, and being able to show how that was done and also show how it linked to a lot of how we do things today, and it still feels very modern and very fresh. It doesn't feel just like some old dusty way of doing something that doesn't have relevance for today, is also, I think, important for people to see and to experience. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make more people aware of this book, or both books really, because it has all of that in there. And the nice thing is it's really written so that even if I know, like in the blurb on the back, it says that it's an intermediate text. I think that's there because he thought he would want people to have some understanding of Egyptian thought and Egyptian religion and that kind of thing. But if you've never done a ritual like this, you can easily take this book, and it's written almost like, in theater, it's like written almost like a script, because you can just pick it up and follow through and know exactly, because it has stage directions in terms of when to offer a libation or when to light incense and then what to say and all of that kind of thing. So somebody who has never done it can easily pick it up and follow through and do it. But it also is very useful for intermediate or even advanced people, because it gives them the framework of very traditional rituals for various deities that they may not have access to otherwise. Because a lot of things are, you might pick it up and it might be like a book, but it's really a Wiccan ritual outline or a structure, and then they just insert the Egyptian deity into that framework. Whereas this is not that at all. It is the framework, the structure of how the ancient Egyptians did it. And that to me is just a different experience, and why I wanted more people to be aware of these books, so that they could maybe have a chance to learn about that and experience it. Because he also does a great job of explaining a lot of things in the book and giving a lot of history or background or commentary on things, so you really also understand the Egyptian thinking and cosmology and all of that behind it. It's not just the ritual itself.
Yeah, I think that was the thing that I really took away from it. It's not, for anyone who does pick up the book, it's not a book you really want to sit down and read cover to cover. It's a little dense for that. But
and he did not write it with that intention
right,
either.
exactly. That's not its purpose. But the commentary sections are really interesting, because it does bring like a pretty clear understanding of the why, not just the how. And I also love that he specifically says, I've changed this because this doesn't apply to a modern practitioner, or like you said, or I've changed this. And then also, in addition to all the stage directions about, how you approach and how you hold your arms, which is very much a part of Egyptian ritual, how you hold your arms and hands. And he also gives you a list of what you need to perform the ritual before you get started. So it's like the best of all worlds. You have this very in-depth commentary about why you're doing all these things, what you need to do it, how to make it work. The thing I came away thinking also too is that I've always considered Egyptian religion to kind of be a split thing. There was what the priests did in the temple, and there was what people at home did. So this is really kind of more like what the priest class would have done in the temple than what people would have done at home, right? Or am I misreading that?
That certainly is true. And a lot of that is because that's the information that we have, because all of this information is taken from Egyptological studies and archaeology and all of that. And of course, most of that comes from the temples that still are there. And the tombs as well, the pyramids. There isn't really a lot that gives us information on what daily practices might have been like and for people. So yes, this is more like if you were a priest in the temple and what you would be doing in the temple. But he did a really good job of then adapting that so that you can be a priest in your own home temple. Even if it's just a little altar on a shelf, but be able to go through the same kind of process, even if you don't have a big temple or even a group of people to do it with.
Yeah. The other thing I've always really loved about when I've read about Egyptian ritual, with this modern adaptation or in ancient ritual, is that the offerings were then shared. They weren't burnt. I mean, I guess sometimes they were if it was for a certain reason. But most of the time, all of the offerings were then divided among the priests or given to the people at the temple, so that it was, it was a gift. The offerings were a gift from the gods to the people. There's right. this interchange of things, all mitigated through that the king is also the person who is doing all of this at the same time. It's fascinating.
Also, when you look at the rituals. When you're doing the rituals, you identify as the deity because you say I. So, I, Jehudi, say these words. It's not the priest, am saying these words that Jehudi has given me or whatever. In essence, you become, when you're in the ritual space, you become that deity and you speak as the deity. So with the food offerings, it's very similar, because even though you have given the offerings to the deities, there's also that sense of, because I was identifying as the deity within the ritual space, those offerings would also revert back to me, because they're being offered back to me, who was the stand-in, the proxy for the deity as well, rather than just being tossed out.
Which I like. I mean, hey, it's good. Zero waste practice.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. They're so beautiful to read. Like, even if you're not a Kemetic practitioner, if you have any interest in like Egyptian mythology or anything like that, like they're just really beautiful to read. Like I don't know like how much translation work he did personally, but like the rituals themselves are just really beautiful to read. Like just
he did some translation work. But he would also look at various sources from like Egyptologists. And he also had relationships with a couple of different Egyptologists, as well as one of the members of his temple who at like 70 years old went back to school at Berkeley to study and get a degree in Egyptology, and specifically with the language and everything, who also was a big help in that way. But he was very careful about the language that was used, because some of the kind of the traditional references would be like budge. They were like from the 19th century and that time period. But what you find in their translations is a very obvious Christian overlay in the way that they translate in the language they use. So Richard was also very, very adamant about looking at and referencing and using much more modern day Egyptologists and translations, as well as he would also adjust the language somewhat from both his understanding of the Egyptian language and how he could see the difference between, well, this is really a very Christian overlay for this translation. And so he would adjust some of those translations to fit more. And, he had a background that in Orthodox Christianity.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He was very high up. I think he was like, he was like the, I don't know, CFO or something, but did like finance or something. But in the U.S. Orthodox Christian Church,
wow, he
was, way up, in the administration of things, and came from that background, and then had his own personal experiences that caused kind of a shift for him to the Kemetic side and all of that. So he was very well aware of being able to identify where there was too much influence or overlay of Christian thought, and not willing to just let that slide by, versus he felt reclaiming it for the Egyptian way of thinking and even Egyptian wording, even if it was in English, but I mean, wording it differently so it wasn't, so Christian influence. And I really appreciated that too. He wasn't necessarily, bashing on Christians or something by doing that. He was just wanting to make it more authentic, because some of that wording would make no sense when they were doing all of this before Christianity ever existed. So why would they have used that terminology in the first place? It wouldn't make any sense.
Right.
So that was also something that I really appreciated about this, was his diligence in doing that. And also why I think some of this appealed to him so much, because these rituals may not necessarily appeal to some people who don't like overly structured ritual. I mean, you can read these rituals and you could think it's like going to a Catholic church for Mass or something like that. I mean, they're very kind of structured. And you don't really, there are little places where you can add in something from your own personal, whatever you want to add into that particular ritual. But otherwise, it's very structured. And of course, that appealed to Richard because he kind of came from a background where he was in an organization that also tended to do things that way. But I would encourage people, if they think that wouldn't appeal to them, to maybe just give them a try, because sometimes having a little bit of structure to lead you to the section that is open for how you now want to add your part into the ritual can sometimes add to or bring a different kind of experience than somebody might be used to if they just go in and kind of just do whatever I'm feeling in the moment whenever they do their ritual kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I think, I don't know, like, I feel like, I don't know, this is more of me as a writer, maybe also a ritualist, but like, I feel like having some structure gives you a better idea to like use your imagination, if that makes sense. Like, if you start with like, oh, these are the rules, scare quotes that listeners can't see, then like, okay, now I know how this works. How can I personalize this? And I think about that, especially in context of like, if you're doing this like at your private altar in your home and doing like a full, this is what the priest would have done, you know, at Karnak or one of these other huge temples. You're like, this doesn't make sense to me because I want to have a more intimate experience. Although I would say actually they're pretty intimate, like the way they're written, like like you said, because you're embodying like they're very intimate, but very formal. And so I think that would be a boon to people who wanted to have some idea about how to approach this without, like you said, like kind of having like a Wiccan derived framework that you just substitute Tahuti or somebody in, and you're like, yeah. I also should mention that he actually uses the Egyptian names for the gods through most of the book instead of the Greek, Roman names.
For a long time, there's been, it's not debate, but I mean, there are a lot of different variations on how they think that they spelled them and how they said them, that they actually pronounced not just the deity names, but I mean, ancient Egyptian in general.
Right.
And so, yes, he will use things that are a little more skewed towards how Egyptologists think that maybe they were spelled or really how they were sounded in ancient Egypt, you know, like Aset, Auset, you might see that instead. You'll see that instead of Isis, or Jehudi. You'll see that instead of Thoth. You know, so if somebody wants to use Thoth instead of Jehudi, he was not opposed to that in the least. But he wanted it to be more closely aligned to how it might have been both not spelled because they wouldn't be using our letters, but really said or pronounced in some way. And I was also going to say, because I know the book you're working on has to do with ancestors. And, you know, following that structure, even if you were by yourself, you're able to kind of tap into and carry on an ancestral tradition and kind of be part of that lineage in that way. Because it's like, you're saying those words today, which are the exact same words that 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, somebody standing in front of the image of the deity was saying too. And to me, there's a lot of resonance and a lot of power that really comes from that, instead of always feeling like I have to make it up for myself all of the time.
Yes.
And I think it's also just a nice way of honoring the ancestors by doing it that way too. I mean, it's one thing to have an ancestral altar and to honor ancestors that way on a regular basis or whatever. But even if you're not doing it in such a formal kind of way in that sense, just following a ritual and saying things the way that somebody would have done it then is also a way of honoring the ancestors and then being a part of that rather than feeling like it's something separate or something they did then, but I just have to imagine now versus can actually literally viscerally feel a part of now.
Yeah. And I agree with you that I think there is, and I mean, it's like, you know, I too come from a Christian background. You know, I grew up kind of church hopping, but eventually like did catechism in the Lutheran church, which is very smells and bells too. Right. And so that's always appealed to me, like that sense of ritual and continuity. And when I was in England last year, I attended a Eucharist service, which probably would shock a lot of people. But I attended a Eucharist service at Winchester Cathedral before we started our pilgrimage. And the little chapel we were in was like this 1,500-year-old chapel that still had frescoes and, that they had painted on it originally when it was built. And all I could think about is like just the amount of prayer and intention and the ritual of the energy that doing the same thing in this space for 50. And now we're talking about something that's thousands of years old. I mean, right. Christianity is old, but Egypt is, what is it? Man fears time, but time fears the pyramids kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty, I don't know. There's not much that we have access to as Westerners that goes deeper than that, I guess.
And I think similar to that, when you're going in and doing it according to like, here's my script, basically, yes, of course, if you're only doing it once, it's a lot of like having to follow the script, figure out what to do. But if you have that and you're doing it regularly, then you stop thinking about it so much, which actually opens up the opportunity for a bigger or a richer or a deeper experience, because your brain is kind of on automatic pilot for the actions or for things you have to say, so that you can sink into it deeper rather than being in your head trying to think about what am I supposed to do and looking at the book or what am I supposed to say, kind of thing. Whereas if you're making it up every time, not that you can't have amazing and profound experiences doing something like that, but if you're making it up every time, then every time you're kind of half in the space of thinking about what I'm doing or what I'm going to say or whatever, and then half in the experience part, versus I can kind of shut some of that off because my brain will just do it automatically because I just know where to or when to pour the libation or what to say as I light the incense. So now I can be more deeply in the experience itself, which I think is also one of the advantages of having something like this that is now written down for us to be able to use as the script or as the template or, to follow, so that we can come to those deeper experiences.
Yeah. So what originally drew you to comedic practice?
I always had an interest in Egypt. Of course, it was from movies and TV and all that kind of stuff. But just always felt some kind of connection pull, there. And then I had, in a ritual, I had an experience with an Egyptian deity named Sobek, who's a crocodile-headed god, or a crocodile-headed god. And Sobek is, one of the aspects of Sobek is, I guess you could think of him as a connector. So it's like, if I said, oh, I need help with this, but I don't know which deity to go to, you can go to Sobek, and Sobek will say, oh, okay, let me listen to what you have, what you're asking about, and then let me help guide you to and connect you with who would be best to help you. So I had an experience with Sobek in a ritual, and then very shortly after is when I discovered the book, and then discovered that Richard was a Pantheacon, and met Richard and discovered that he had the things. So to me, it was like, oh, well, look, Sobek just did his job, basically. It wasn't because I really asked, but just kind of did that. And then, meeting him and reading the book, and then it just kind of clicked and all fell into place from that earlier interest and feeling of connection to something that made it now very real and very tangible. And then just built on it from there by being able to become a part of one of their temples and become very active with them.
Mm-hmm. So are the temples still a going concern?
In Denver, yes. The San Jose one, the challenge was that, they're small temples.
Mm-hmm.
Like the San Jose one, when it was at its biggest, was, I think, maybe 6 people.
Mm-hmm.
But, when you have 6 people that are willing to come together monthly, really twice a month, because we would meet monthly to do a ritual, and then we would also meet monthly for academic purposes. We would have something that we would read or whatever, and then get together to talk about it, or that kind of thing. But I mean, that can be have a very profound impact for a person's practice, because you just have that sense of community, even if it's small. But then a couple of the members moved away. That's how the Sacramento Temple actually started, because there was a couple of people that moved to Sacramento. And then one or two of the people moved to Denver, which is how the Denver was started, which also then meant that the San Jose one suddenly didn't have anybody to meet with. And then, of course, in 2015, Richard died very unexpectedly. I mean, he had a heart attack when he was at home, and died, almost, I think, immediately at home. So for us, it was a bit of a shock, because it's not like there was any health issues or we weren't planning for or anything like that. So, that had a bit of an impact. We did continue on for another couple of years. And then when a couple of people moved away, that kind of scattered things a bit. So no, although there would certainly be willingness if there was people that were local to get together and wanted to do that. There would certainly be interest in reviving some sort of temple to do ritual regularly, whether it's monthly or every month or whatever. But, there would certainly be openness and willingness to that.
Yeah. I know people listening to the podcast know that I'm new to California still. I mean, well, I've been here almost 5 years, but it still feels new. But I always kind of thought, as San Jose, at least, as kind of this like hotbed of Egyptian stuff because of the Rosicrucian Museum. Yeah. And so it was kind of surprising to learn that was actually kind of true, at least at some point, that, that there had been some practicing groups. I know that the Rosicrucian approach to Egyptian practice is very different. It's kind of more of that Christian overlay on Egyptian practice.
Whether it's Christian or just an Egyptian overlay to New Age kind of things. Yeah.
But it's interesting
which
to
we're
me.
not necessarily opposed to. It's just, it was just more, we don't want people to just think that's how ancient Egyptian practice and belief was. And just to give them an alternative to see maybe something that's a little more authentic or true to how it was back then.
It kind of goes back to honoring the ancestors. Like this is more like what they might have done, though not in English, obviously, and not in someone's house. Or something. But I think I don't know. I'm just fascinated by it. And I too was like one of those kids who was like fascinated with Egypt, and probably have seen most of the very bad documentaries that were on the old version of the History Channel about Egypt. I've probably seen all of them. It's interesting to me, and it's interesting to, for someone like Reedy to, kind of parlay this interest or, whatever the spark was for him to go this deep on a subject and to really, do the work on a level that I think shows a dedication to your belief and practice that would be a challenge for a lot of people. Not necessarily that people don't want to do it, but it would just be a challenge to do that. So I think, I don't know, I'm always fascinated by other people's obsessions, I guess.
Well, I think he had a very academic bent to him. And so, he kind of was an amateur Egyptologist without ever having gone to school for an Egyptology degree, and wasn't necessarily interested in being an archaeologist, but was certainly much more interested in being able to bring that world and that culture and that time period to life, and in that kind of authentic way, and honoring that, and then making it accessible. So we're certainly very grateful that he had that diligence to do it that way and not just try to make up his own rituals to write a book about, kind of thing. And one of the things that you had said when you talked about, obviously they didn't do it in English back then, in the rituals, there are little portions, and sometimes it's just a phrase or maybe a couple of phrases that are in as close as we can approximate to ancient Egyptian. And, they're written there, and then they're given in phonetic so that you would be able to say them. And, he never felt like, well, if you don't say the whole thing in ancient Egyptian, it's not really authentic kind of thing. But being able to have a few phrases and things to say in ancient Egyptian just created a stronger connection, and he felt was also just a way of honoring the deities and the ancestors, but really the deities, because it was, it's just like if you go to any foreign country, if you just learn how to say hello and thank you and goodbye in their language, it's just a huge difference, and it kind of shows a certain respect. It's like, okay, I'm not just coming in expecting you to speak English, but I will at least make the attempt to learn a few words to meet you at your level because I'm in your culture. And I think that was kind of how he felt too, by including that, and was really encouraged. I mean, it also has what the English is. If somebody doesn't want to say the ancient Egyptian, you can say it in English. But I think that was one of the things that he really felt was important to do as an acknowledgement and an honoring and a respect, by at least having something in there that you would say in ancient Egyptian.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, it makes sense to be a good guest, right? Be a good guest. Yeah. So do you feel like aspects of Kemetic practice have like influenced other things in like your work and practice?
Oh, sure. And also it's interesting to sometimes see how those things show up from other cultures. So one of the things in the Kemetic rituals, there's a whole thing that you do when you're lighting the incense, and you say words to the incense, and you have this whole relationship with the incense process and the incense itself. And I studied the Japanese tea ceremony for 8 years, and they also have an incense ceremony. And it was very interesting to me in terms of kind of the approach and connection to incense that you do in that Japanese ritual that really echoed for me how in the Kemetic ritual you are connecting with and kind of interacting with the incense as well. Because most people just think of incense as something, well, you light the stick and then you let it burn and do its smoke, but they don't really have a connection to it. So now, I mean, there's a certain little couple of phrases that you say whenever you're lighting the incense, and I've adopted that, and that is anytime I light incense, even if it's just, guests are coming over, I'm just going to light a stick of incense, I still will always say those words when I'm lighting the incense, which keeps me in a regular sense of connection to the incense, the divine aspect of things, I guess, because it's not just get a lighter and light the incense. It's actually me taking even just that moment to step into more of the divine connection and awareness of what I'm doing and where I'm at and the bigger aspect of things. So, and there's other little aspects from the rituals that I will bring over that are very easy to kind of use in a daily practice, and hieroglyphs I will use, if I take an herbal supplement that's a tincture, because you would do it like in a dropper, and a lot of times you'll put it like in water. I will, when I'm putting the drops into the water, I will draw the hieroglyphs with the drops, because in order to kind of draw and infuse that water that I'm now going to ingest with the energy of those hieroglyphs, whether it's the Ankh, which is a very common one, which is just supporting the whole life force energy. But if it's something that is like, say it's a tincture for the immune system, I'll do the hieroglyph for health. when I'm doing the drops, So for me, it's finding ways to bring those things into the very daily, mundane, not in a negative way, but just that daily aspect of things, that finding those ways to do that. And he even gives an example in the book, because he gives you, he created a very shortened version of one of the rituals that you can do on a daily basis. And it is very short. And so like he printed it out and laminated it, and then he would have it in his shower. And then he would just say that and do that while he was in the shower. I mean, it's literally something that you can do in 3 minutes. It's not a very long thing, but it still brings in all of the essence of what the bigger ritual would be. So also having something like that, because if you don't have these rituals, you have to set some time aside for, because they I mean, it depends on how fast you want to do them, but they certainly are going to take 30, 45 minutes if you're going to just really sit with them and do them properly, if not longer, if you really want to do it. But, having something like that you can then do just on a quick daily basis, again, for me, is a way to always come back to and be reminded of and connect with that divine space and that ritual space. And it's great, of course, to start a day, because how you start a day sets the energy for a day. So just doing something like that for 3 minutes in the shower, since you're taking a shower anyway, kind of helps to connect you to that and then set the energy for the day. So in those ways, hopefully this is answering your question. Good heavens.
I think so.
In those ways, I've really kind of taken from them and then found ways to bring them into and incorporate into daily life, rather than seeing it as something that I only get to experience or I only connect with, once a month when I set aside time to do this long, involved ritual. I mean, those are great too, and that's a different kind of experience. But being able to incorporate it into daily things, to me, is really important.
And I do love that. I do love when we see those echoes of things across cultures. I think it's really easy to fall into this, Victorian idea of universalism, which I don't really believe in that way. But I do think that there are things about our humanness that are universal, and then that sometimes shows up in these kind of rituals. And I like that idea of kind of the animism of Shinto. And I love how he talks about animism is not exactly the right word for how Egyptians looked at the world. And that kind of goes back to that ritual of the opening of the mouth. Things were kind of imbued, but not necessarily, it's not necessarily an animistic worldview in the same way that we think about it now.
Right.
But I do love that there is that echo, with the incense. And I also really love the idea of habit stacking your spirituality. So, I think that, it makes sense to me. If you're going to make your coffee in the morning, why not, draw a hieroglyph or a sigil or say a prayer over it? If you're going to do it every day, and it's something at my basic, most kitcheny, head witchy heart, I feel like the mundane things we do are the things that really matter. The things that we touch the most are imbued with our spirit the most. And why not make that a spiritual moment if you can? Or, why not include that? Like you said, if you're going to take a shower anyway, why not use it to set a tone for the day, to put yourself at right? I mean, the world is chaos. Take it, take things where you can get them.
Yeah, I think that animism but not idea is kind of there, because the Egyptians very much saw and believed in the idea of a symbol can take on the energy of the living thing and work just as effectively or be used just as effectively. If somebody just picked up that book and they saw that instead of sacrificing a bull, to cook the meat and have that for ritual purposes, that it says to use, it'd be like if you carved out of wood something that looks like a bull's leg.
Mm-hmm.
So you can use that just as effectively as if you actually killed the actual animal.
Right.
Because that was seen. And some people might think that that was just an adaptation that maybe Richards did because, in the modern day, some people would be opposed to like sacrificing an animal. So therefore he came up with something else. And it's like, well, no, actually, this was the Egyptian thought.
Mm-hmm.
And they did this as well. So, that I think was also important for me too. I mean, on the one hand, being vegetarian, I was like, well, God, anything that's like,
I'm not gonna cook a bull. I'm not gonna sacrifice a bull.
Subject.
Yeah.
But just that there was already that mindset, there was already that approach to things. Whether it was drawing the hieroglyph of it or what. That's why you'll see, like, when you see depictions on a tomb wall of the person who died in the field of reeds, but it like shows them in this, a field of reeds, here we are. But it'll show like a whole bunch of geese flying around or, something like that. And the idea was, if we portray it this way, then that will become what is manifested, or that is what is in the Duat, the other world. I know people always say underworld, but Duat really isn't underworld. It's just the netherworld.
Yeah.
And so that was already very much in there. And just that perspective was really, I think, impactful for me as I started to become more exposed to it and understand that in the way that I just look at the world and was more conscientious about anything, not only that I said, but even things that I would write or draw or give to someone or use for something. It wasn't just random. It always brought me back to the conscientiousness of intention behind what that was and imbuing it with that purpose, and then not using it for something else. I mean, maybe that's my personal thing, but it's like, okay, if I've decided to use this to represent this in a ritual setting, I won't, even if it's just like a bowl, I won't go and then use that bowl for anything else. I just kind of, now that's become that thing.
It has become a part of the ritual.
Aside, rather than it's like, oh, I'll just grab this and do this, and then it'll go back, and now I'll just put my peanut butter in it or something.
Now that's ritual peanut butter.
That's right.
It's funny because I think about that, like, I mean, kind of in a weird roundabout way to get to writing. Like, I think about that with books, like as an author, like, I feel like, as an author, I feel like words have real magic and meaning, and that they should be respected in that way because they have magic and meaning. They do represent thoughts and ideas and concrete things and all of that, and have that power. And then, like, I think about, when I'm writing a book, the manuscript that I work on is kind of its own being, right? It's its thing. And then that will go on and get reproduced in copies of books. And then each person who reads their copy of that book kind of imbues it with their own, they're reading it through their lens, their understanding of the vocabulary I've used, all of that. They may mark it up. I really hope they do. I 100% for people making books their own. I know that just makes some people shudder, but I'm like, you paid for it. Unless it's like some super special copy or rare book. If it's a mass printed book, that is yours, and you should make it yours however you want to. But then each of those books takes on, they become their own creature separate from the manuscript that I wrote. They each come and have their own life. And I think that's probably an animistic worldview. Maybe there's a little of that Egyptian imbuing of things in there too. But like, I just don't, I think sometime.
Whereas on the other hand, I might say, in terms of these rituals, I wouldn't look at these rituals as something that somebody should just mark up and make their own.
Yeah.
Now,
I understand.
There is that section in the ritual where you can now do whatever you're going to do related to the ritual that you craft for yourself. but they kind of exist as this larger thing. To me, that's kind of like they're imbued with this life force that they have. And just like the bowl that I wouldn't use for anything else, these rituals are now just this. I'm not going to take this ritual for, well, now we generally think that it was said Re instead of Ra, but most people probably know it as Ra for the sun god. I'm not going to take that ritual and then just substitute out Ra's name for, I don't know, Athena.
Yeah. No. That makes sense.
Or something.
Yeah. I meant more as like your notes on your thoughts and stuff like that, more than like changing the ritual. But yeah, no, that I understand. And I feel like that also honors, again, the work that, honors the tradition of it and honors the work that Reedy did to lay this out for people. So that makes sense to me too. I mean, I guess, and like, it'd be interesting to see, like, like looking at the difference, like you said, between Budge's translations and what, like the Victorian era that were kind of, that now are a little suspect for most people. And we're like, oh, there's better ways to look at this. Like, what in 100 years will we understand even more than we don't now, if we're still here, knock on wood. Like, how do we, things will evolve, like our understanding will evolve. But, and then like thinking about a work like this in that arc of evolution of our understanding is kind of like, that to me seems like an important place that Reedy stands as an ancestor now in this kind of arc of understanding. So I don't know.
And I think as everything evolves around us, having kind of those touch points or kind of that centering point that like the ritual represents, by it kind of remaining static in the sense that we still do it the same way, we still say the same things, is kind of like the grounding point amidst all of the evolution, so that we can make sense of how things evolve by having this thing that we can use to access whatever that evolution is, rather than thinking that the rituals themselves need to constantly be changed.
Right. Oh, I like that idea a lot. Like the center, kind of the center that holds around all of the stuff that often spins out of our control.
And I know you mentioned the opening of the mouth ritual, and it was a scramble because Richard's family is still very religious, Christian religious. They certainly were not very approving or on board with his whole shift into the Kemetic side of things. He was not, it's not like he hid it. He was certainly not, shy about it or tried to keep it from them in any way, which I applaud. And because he died so suddenly, we very much wanted to be able to do the opening of the mouth ritual. It's a very challenging thing to be able to do in the very authentic way, because just in our culture, you don't have access to bodies and, that kind of thing. And then with his family, it was also a challenge because, of course, they were just doing the normal thing of setting up the funeral home so that they can then do the funeral and have the burial, but then, of course, wanted to do it in their way, even though he had very explicitly asked for it to be done in the Egyptian way and for us to do it. They were not very open to that idea. I will give them credit. They allowed us to come to the funeral home an hour prior to when the funeral service was going to start. Now, if you're doing a real and true opening of the mouth ritual, an hour isn't necessarily enough, especially when you have to bring everything into a funeral home, get it all set up, then do the ritual, get it all taken down before they're going to want to come in and do whatever their thing is. So at least they allowed us to come and do that. And we got, because they were doing a viewing of the body, so at least we had access to the body in that way. So we got through a portion of it. And then, of course, they came in and were like, you need to get out now, because they wanted to get on with their thing. So we actually did a very Egyptian thing in that we gathered up all of the stuff, and there's a lot of stuff opening the mouth ritual. We gathered up all of the stuff and we went into another room, and we had a picture of Richard. So we set up the picture, which basically became his avatar, is what we would say today, his avatar for him, and then continued to do the ritual around the image so that we could at least feel it was completed in that way.
Yeah.
And we did go to the grave. We were bold, I guess, in asking the family to do this, because at the graveside, of course, everybody was there. We tried to get there a little quicker so that not everybody was there, but there were still people there, because there is also something you do at the grave where you offer like milk and different things as a whole thing. And we wanted to make sure to do that. So we did go and do that as well. I think a little to the family's chagrin. And I think a lot of the people that were there were a little perplexed as to what we were doing, and stuff. But we just kind of did it and then stepped away and, let them do their thing. We didn't like make a spectacle of it. I mean, obviously people were seeing us doing it, but we weren't like trying to make a spectacle of it, to make a point.
Yeah. I mean, you were honoring his wishes. You were honoring his wishes. Yeah.
Well, exactly. That's also why I think we felt emboldened, because we were like, these were his very explicit written wishes for what he wanted it done. So we were very pleased that we were able to do that. Yeah. So I just thought I'd mention that because I know you had mentioned the opening of the mouth ritual, but I don't know if you had other questions about that.
I'm glad that you all were able to do that for him. It's probably a good reminder to people. Actually, one of the things that Lisa McSherry, my guest next month, is kind of touting in her social medias right now is that if you have changed the religion from your family of origin, you better have a will. And you better have your desires legally available to the people who you want to take care of that. This also applies, obviously, to gay and trans people, but it applies to pagans and witches and other occultists as well. If you have also real wishes, you need to make those known to somebody who will execute them.
Exactly. And hopefully you have someone who will also respect those wishes and kind of be willing to fight to try to make sure that they are honored. Because I think, especially our way of thinking, I mean you and me, but I mean our society, generally it's said that, funerals and things like that are really for the living and not for the dead, because it's to give the people who are still alive a way to say goodbye or a way to somewhere to put their emotions, or whatever. But I think what that does is it does a disservice and almost a dishonoring to both death and to the spirit of the person who has died, and in a sense to the ancestors. Because if you, like in this example, if you have someone who has very explicitly said, this is how I want my funeral to go, or this is what I would like to have done when I die, in terms of I want this ritual done, etc., which is very tied to their belief of these are the things that help me as I move into the afterlife and all of that kind of thing. Not doing those is not about a funeral is for the living. It's really about ego.
Right.
And I think it's a dishonoring of the person and their memory by not doing those things. So that was also one of the reasons why we felt like we're going to try to push back and on the family as much as we possibly can and see what we can be able to do. Because yes, it's important to have space and whatever our rituals are for people who are still alive to come and, do what they need to do around accepting the death of someone and processing emotion, etc. But I think we have to make sure we don't forget the actual person and spirit who died in that process, by not doing what might have been their wishes or would have been correct or aligned with who they were, just because it would make us feel better to do something different.
Agreed. And I don't know, I've been to too many ostensibly Christian funerals with people who had not been churched for a long time. And the minister who's talking about them clearly didn't know them as a person and didn't know anything about them.
Yeah.
And it feels so disconnected to me and disrespectful. And that's just not me, pagan witchy girl talking. That's me, Victoria, like, you have just disrespected my aunt kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, I just, I feel like we have done such an excellent job as a culture of pushing death behind this wall that somehow it will never touch us. It's something far distant in the future that we have not thought about, that we all deserve a good death as much as we deserve a good life, and putting those wishes into some kind of form that can help people execute that for you. And if you're in a unique situation, like a lot of pagans and queer and trans people are,
Mm-hmm.
then you got to add that extra layer of someone will go, no, you're not putting their dead name on their tombstone. You're not doing these things. This is not what this person wanted. And having some legal teeth behind it in a will can really help. But
Right.
again, families are families and they're going to do what they do. But having some, not that this is about writing or this book at all, but I feel like it's an important thing to talk about.
No, yeah, it is. And you find that I also have a background in Buddhism, and you find that, one of the challenges for people who are not strictly Buddhist, but are just very heavily Buddhist in their practices and beliefs is, one of the things that Buddhism will say, at least in many strains of Buddhism, is that you don't touch a dead body for 3 days
Mm-hmm.
because the soul or the spirit needs that time to do the separation process and all of that, and that's almost impossible in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
Because if somebody dies in a medical facility, they're never going to allow the body, one, to sit untouched for 3 days.
Right.
And two, they're not going to let people in, to do those things when the body is already dead. So you have to kind of learn how to find ways around that or adapt to that or, work with that. And that's another thing that I was always fascinated by, because you find so many similarities between time periods and cultures in terms of especially views of things like the afterlife or the underworld or the other world or whatever
Mm-hmm.
term you want to use for it. Because, like in Buddhism, you have when you die, but then you have your 40 days in Bardo,
Mm-hmm.
which, you could say it's purgatory, but it's really just an in-between state because it's just seen as the spirit or the soul needs time to adjust to being dead and then prepare for whatever they need to do to prepare for whatever the next rebirth is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And in Egyptian thought, you have the almost exact same thing, but it's 70 days that they saw were from dying to mummification and then moving into the afterlife kind of thing. So those are things that always struck me. And maybe there are things that go back further. We just don't have any records of it, so we don't necessarily know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's one of the things that appealed to me about Comedicism is so much of it feels like the ancient Egyptian source is kind of the origin story, or maybe just where we started to see some of those things codified and maybe written down.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have to think that a lot of the Egyptian way of thinking is related to things that came before, but if they were just oral traditions and that kind of thing, you wouldn't have a lot of written records or indications of it, but the Egyptians then started to codify and write these things down.
Mm-hmm.
So even though they may not actually be the origin of it, they at least were what brought it to something that future generations would have more access to, that would never hear the oral tradition that would be passed down. And I think that's one of the things that also has always appealed to me, is it's like I want to go back to the source, or at least as far back to the source that we have access to do things in that way, to understand that perspective and way of seeing the universe and how it's made up and the cosmology of things and all of that. And then work from there rather than just starting here and then constantly being reminded of, oh, well, actually, this is very similar to this. So why am I not just going back there instead of, being
Go to
here?
the source.
Yeah. Just like with the language, it's like I could just use the Budge translations, but it's like, well, wait, if I go back further and actually look at the language itself, then there's a different connotation or there's different inference or, that kind of thing. So I'd rather go back to that than just take for granted a more modern interpretation of what that was and then think that must have been how they thought too.
Yeah.
Was there anything in particular when you had mentioned you wanted to talk about the opening of the mouth ritual?
No, just
was there something
idea,
in particular about it
that kind of idea? Like, I think the way it's written in the book is really fascinating. Like, just the concept of how the time, the elaborateness of it, like just this, like that level of devotion to that particular ritual to me seems especially poignant to us, and even if you're not a Kemetic practitioner, there's something about that ritual in particular that is just, like just reading it, I got a little emotional, weirdly. Like it's just very, I don't know. Yeah, it just hit. It just hit in a different way
like you were
than a lot
about.
of them.
I mean, it makes you much more connected to and aware of and invested in the idea of death, the death process, etc., compared to what we do, which is, you set up a funeral at a funeral home for noon, and then the funeral home tells you, and we have another one at 1, so we need yours to be 45 minutes long, and so you're just trying to figure out what can we do to fit into this time.
Yeah.
I guess people can make the argument the other way too, but it feels very performative, but there isn't like this deeper connection to it. Whereas investing in the time you have to put towards preparing for, gathering the things that are needed, setting up the space, going through the process of the opening of the ritual and all of that is very different than a feeling of get out kind of thing that we have with the way that we tend to approach these
Well, you get an hour in the funeral home and 3 days off work. That's not really enough to connect you to what's happened, I think.
And the 3 days off of work aren't really allowing you to just sit in that space of grief or processing or whatever. It's really about, okay, great, I have 3 days to figure out how do I contact the trust attorney so I know what needs to get signed and has to be done, and or what do I have to do in order for the inheritance thing to happen, or we have to get the house ready to sell. It's just all of these things.
And show back at work all chipper and not, grief stricken.
Right. Yeah. But there's never time or emphasis placed on actually just sitting in the space of death and grief. It's all the other stuff that suddenly you have to take care of that we get focused on and that we only do, and that our society thinks that's, here, I'll give you 3 days to go and deal with all of the paperwork so that you can come back, to work kind of thing, rather than it being, I'll give you 3 days to just go and sit by the lake so that you can have your time and not have to worry about or think about anything else. But it's like you were saying, we've pushed death so far away from us that, we'd rather focus on paperwork so that we don't have to actually sit with death or grief or mourning.
It's all logistics, not spirituality or emotion. It's a weird place. But so the thing, to kind of think about, I don't know, I'm not great at tying a bow on things. Endings are hard, right?
Can I say one more thing first for what we're just talking about? A lot of times people think about the ancient Egyptians as being obsessed with death because of the pyramids, because of the way that a lot of the things have been translated. One, we would say to that's because a lot of the things that we have found archaeologically and, are related to things related to death, tombs, et cetera. But that doesn't mean that they had an obsession with death. It just means those are a lot of the things that we have found and that have given us access into that culture. but even in some of the translations, because you'll often hear of the Book of the Dead, which in a proper translation is the Book of Coming Forth by Day. So even though they might have thought about death a lot, they weren't thinking about death. They were thinking about whether it's their idea of rebirth or what came after in the afterlife, but coming forth by day. Because some people think that in the pyramids, along the walls, which is where a lot of this is taken from, along the walls is where a lot of the Book of the Dead comes from. But if you read it one way, like when you're going into the pyramid, yes, you might think this is kind of what it was about, like if somebody dies and now they're going to the afterlife. But if you read it when you're in the pyramid coming out, then you see that actually what you're reading is, how do I come out of this darkness into the light? Because you come out of the pyramid into the desert sun, and so it's a whole different perspective to take on what it really is representing. And I mean, you can get theories where they think that the pharaohs that maybe the pyramids weren't actually tombs, that they were more shamanic chambers. And so like a pharaoh would go into there and go through a shamanic process and then come out, but that's why we have the coming forth by day. But it was this whole process of, just like we would think of, you do a shamanic work that's going to take you deep to do your shadow work and deal with all of that, and then you come out of it and now you're a different person or whatever. So and that's why I think it's interesting, even because opening of the mouth is really seen as the death ritual. But just look at the name of it, opening of the mouth. That's not what you would think to call something that is about, because we would call it, in our culture, we would call it something like, saying goodbye or, peaceful
the closing
transition
of the mouth.
or something. Yeah. But here it was actually like, I'm imbuing life into this spirit. I'm actually opening the mouth, not closing the mouth, which is what we think of in our culture as death, is like the ending of something. Whereas from an Egyptian standpoint, it was more a new beginning of something. And so, and Richard was very adamant about kind of pointing this out a lot too, that our tendency to think that they were so obsessed with death is not really an accurate perspective. So since we were talking about opening of the mouth and death and stuff, I just wanted to point that out because I think it is something to keep in mind whenever you're seeing these things, that don't look at them or read them as the Egyptian obsession with death versus, no, it was much more about life and living, whether it was living in our current form or whether it was afterlife and living in the next phase of things. So I just wanted to toss that in.
No, I think it's important. It's important. And I agree. Yeah. But I was thinking, like, just in like reading your newsletter and like the work you do as a tarot consultant and things like that, like it seems to me like you have pulled on so many threads to kind of create your practice and kind of how you interact with the world. And I kind of just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that. If you want to.
I started with, in tarot as kind of the main thing. But I have also studied astrology and some other things. So I certainly try to pull those things into it because I just look at them as all tools in a tool belt. It's not like there's one size fits all, one thing that serves all purpose. They each have their uses, just like a hammer and a saw have their different uses, but can both be used to build the same structure. So, I felt that it was important to have knowledge in those different things and then pull those in, still kind of using tarot as the centering point, but then having those other things to bring in to add layers to it. So I pull astrology in quite a bit for it, numerology a little bit. And it was just to make it multifaceted and multi-layered rather than just a single thing. And, and I've always called myself a tarot conversationalist rather than a tarot reader, because I don't think it's about me just speaking at you. I think it has to be a dialogue really between the client and the cards and what the cards are connecting to and what they have to say. And I'm just kind of the mailman, and if the universe sent the message in French, I'm just helping to translate it for you, but it still is a dialogue. So that's why I use the term tarot conversationalist instead of tarot reader. And then ritualist, of course, because obviously I love ritual. Hence, I love or attraction to this book and the way that it approaches ritual and things. But I think those are really important too, to create space, tap into energies, and then be able to harness those things in whatever way that you might be needing in yourself or in your life at any particular moment.
I love that. So do you want to tell folks how they might be able to interact with your work as a tarot conversationalist?
Well, my website is tarotbyhic.net, TAROTBYHIC. I know I say tarot, but I speak French, and half the time people are like, what? I'm like, tarot. I'm like, oh, no, I know what it is. And on social media, almost anywhere you can find me just by looking for Tarot by HiC. I mean, that's pretty much my screen name for everything. I think the only one might be a slightly different is maybe on TikTok, it's Tarot HiC instead of Tarot by HiC.
Gotcha.
And on Substack, I think it's also Tarot HiC. But generally speaking, you're going to find me anywhere there. And on my website, I mean, you can always click to get a reading for readings in person if people are in the San Francisco Bay Area or virtually on FaceTime or whatever. And they can subscribe to my newsletter. I send that out. It's not exactly daily, but it's usually a few days a week. I really send it out when it's more astrology oriented, because I find that tarot is something that's much more about a particular moment and something to do around a very specific question or questions and that kind of thing. Whereas astrology to me is like the weather. It's like the energy that's in the air. So the newsletter tends to be more focused on that. So it generally gets sent out whenever there's a particular day that there's an astrological aspect or something that is happening. And on my website, you can just click get a reading if you want a reading, or subscribe to the newsletter if they want to do that. And I also usually will post that astrological information on social media as well. If they follow me on social media, they would likely see it there as well.
And I'll have links for all of that in the show notes for folks.
And I'm probably a glutton for punishment because I think I'm on every social media platform.
You're a brave person.
Is. Yeah. Facebook to Instagram to Blue Sky to Threads to TikTok, Substack, YouTube. So it's not difficult to find me. Snapchat.
Right. Wow, you have got all your best stuff. I was waiting for you to name something I'd never even heard of. But well, thank you so much. Thanks for recommending this book. Like, I don't know that this is one I would have found otherwise on my own. So I just really appreciate you recommending it and taking the time to
it's also nice to bring
us.
awareness because Richard ultimately decided to self-publish. So, it doesn't have like some sort of publishing company or marketing machine behind it or anything like that. So and his goal always was really just to bring people, as many people as possible, in whatever way possible, into connection with and or relationship with, depending on what they decided to do, with the Netcheru, the deities, ancient Egyptian divine beings. So, it's always a pleasure and grateful to be able to make more people aware of it in ways, and maybe have people discover it and find, oh, wow, there is something there for me, even in this Kemetic approach to things, that while you may not be Kemetic, it may still be something that resonates for you, that you might be able to color your practice with, even if it's not converting to Kemeticism.
Oh, I love that. Again, thank you. Like, thanks for your time and thoughtfulness and for chatting. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you very much for the invitation.
WitchLit is a production of 1000 Volt Press and is edited by Julian Raschke. Our intro music is Cosmic Glow by Andrew Kay, and our outro music is Voices by Alexander Shanekar. Transcripts and all our previous episodes are available at witchlitpod.com, and you can follow us on Instagram or Threads at WitchLitPod. Please help other witches find us by leaving a rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you for listening to and reading WitchLit.